Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Violent Night, the brand new Christmas movie releasing in theaters right now with David Harbour as Santa Claus. And this movie is basically Die Hard but with Santa, so you're going to get exactly what you're expecting with this movie, but that doesn't mean it's not a whole lot of fun. I really enjoyed this movie and I want to talk about spoilers for this one, so if you've not seen Violent Nights, I'm going to talk about some spoilers, but like I said, it's Die Hard but with Santa, so there's nothing really too crazy, but there are a couple things I do want to talk about in this film. So I want to talk about the negatives first for this movie so I can get on with the positives, because there's a lot of stuff that I'm excited to talk about later on. But to start off with, there's no Hans Gruber in this movie. There's no Alan Rickman to kind of ground it with that great villain, the great speeches that he has and the great monologues and just the intensity that Alan Rickman brought to the Hans Gruber role in Die Hard. This time we have John Leguizamo as Mr. Scrooge, Mr. Scrooge. See, I'm having a hard time remembering the names of some of the goons in this movie, and there are even two goons in this film that I actually think are better than John Leguizamo in this movie. He's fine. His backstory is basically that, you know, he had a bad Christmas, his family didn't have money, so they couldn't afford presents, so he tried to go over to his neighbor's house and steal all their presents, but then, like, the grandfather fell down the stairs and he accidentally died, and maybe he pushed him, maybe he didn't. It's kind of left ambiguous for some reason, but that's kind of his backstory of why he hates Christmas, and when he finds out that it is the real Santa that is, you know, being the Bruce Willis to his Alan Rickman, then there's some sort of like vengeance that he wants to get against Santa. I think they could have done it a lot better with the backstory that actually made him want to physically like kill Santa. That gives him more of a reason to do this. And as ridiculous as what I'm talking about, it fits the tone of the movie, but just his backstory didn't really work for me. There's also the family that's being held hostage by Mr. Scrooge and all these people, all these goons that are holding them down, and the kind of ancillary characters of this family are kind of weak, like the sister and her husband and just that kid and all of them. I didn't really care about them. I honestly wanted them to die a lot sooner than one of them did, and the other one survived, unfortunately, but I didn't really care about those characters pretty much at all. And the movie does have something to say about, you know, rich people and just how insufferable they can be, and when it comes to that side of the family, you do get a sense of that, but at times in this movie, it decides to focus in on them rather than, you know, Santa and David Harbour and the daughter and everything that he's doing with all the goons. It kind of pulls away from that storyline at times, and it feels like this movie does feel maybe 20 minutes too long. This movie's an hour and 50 minutes long, and I feel like this could have been a really great 90 minutes just fun, ridiculous action movie, but it had times where it just kind of pulled away from Santa and just dealt with these side characters that I just didn't really care about. But that being said, this movie does live up to the promise of being Die Hard with Santa. This movie has some actually pretty damn incredible action sequences. I really liked the Wonder sequence. The first fight that Santa had against this one goon was really brutal, and it had a sense of like he's actually getting beaten up by these goons. He's just not a perfect fighter, and although you get some backstory with Santa of him being a Viking warrior back thousands of years ago, and he was like so brutal, and he would have been on the naughty list back then, and like this very dark backstory for Santa Claus, which is I was not expecting at all, which I think is kind of funny. I had a big smile on my face every time they flashed back to that, and I kind of wish we got a full scene of just Santa being brutal in the past as a Viking, but you know, of course we only got glimpses of that. But when he's first fighting, he's kind of rusty. He's starting off in this movie at a very state of just like he's given up on life, essentially. He's a drunk at the beginning of the movie. He stopped at a bar. He's drinking. He has some very funny jokes. And of course, it's David Harbour. He's going to have a lot of charisma in this role, even when he's being very cynical and very just kind of dour. And I think that's also a negative for this movie for some people. It worked for me, but the cynicism that this movie has for Christmas can sometimes feel a bit much at the beginning of the movie, but it is his arc. He goes from being a cynical Santa that just thinks that all these kids just want is video games and money, which is very true, but at the same time, you want some hope in our Santa Claus. And so throughout the movie, he not only gets his, you know, wants for the Christmas spirits back again because of this family that he does want to save, you know, the main parents and the main daughter of this movie that try to enlist his help in order to save them from these mercenaries, but then, you know, he gets some sense of that fight back in him as well from that, you know, warrior that he was back 1,000 years ago, but to use those evil things that he did back then for good. And as ridiculous as it is that I'm explaining this to you guys, and as I'm talking about this, it is ridiculous, the tone of the movie really does capture it well, because it's very, very self-serious at times, which makes it even funnier. The way that they talk about his backstory, the way that he's talking to the daughter over the radio, and just how goofy and kind of corny and just hilarious that it is that these conversations are happening, it just fits the tone of this movie so well. It's so much fun to watch Santa just essentially murder a bunch of people, which, again, this movie's not going to be for everybody. The tone of this movie, the cynicism of this movie at the beginning, and just kind of the journey that it takes you on with this crazy action action movie with some great, stunts and great performances from Dave Harbour as this character. It's a blast. The little girl in this movie can at times be annoying, but she's a little girl. She plays the role that she's going to play in this type of movie, and it does have some Home Alone references as well. So this is kind of Die Hard meets Home Alone for one scene of this movie where the daughter is setting up these traps to get these two goons. The two goons that I actually do like more than Mr. Scrooge in this movie were Candy Cane and Gingerbread. These two characters were the Harry and Marv of the Home Alone type of movie, and they're kind of going up this ladder. They see the traps right in front of them, like, we're not going to fall for this. This isn't Home Alone. It's not like the movie. We're going to be able to just go up there and kill this kid because they're evil and they want to kill a child because they're goons in a movie. But the way that they are killed, especially the guy Gingerbread, how he is killed by the daughter, is so brutal. I was curling up in my seat, just like, God, it was so bloody and brutal, and just the gore in this movie and the violence in this movie with the action sequences, especially this Home Alone sequence, which is my favorite sequence in the movie, even above the Santa Claus scene in the shed with, him just absolutely annihilating like 30 goons all at the same time. It was amazing to see that sequence, but the Home Alone sequence lived up to the promise of this movie, which was how fun this premise could be and just how entertaining this premise can be. And both of those sequences, both the shed scene and the Home Alone scene, it made this movie so well. Like, those two scenes were back to back happening at the same time. That's by far my favorite part of this movie. And it makes sense that David Leitch is a producer on this movie because, of course, he directed, I think he somewhat directed the first John Wick movie, but he was more so in terms of like the action choreography and the direction of that sort of stuff. He directed Deadpool 2. Of course, he's going to be a producer on this film. The director of this film didn't really do too many great things beforehand. I mean, he wrote Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, so it's kind of weird that he went from, writing a film like that to now directing a film like this one. But he really did capture the tone and that action, that gore, and just the brutality and the fun tone of this movie so perfectly. I think the comedy worked a lot of the time and the action worked a lot of the time, and I think that is thanks to just the team working behind this movie. I think they really struck gold with the tone and the feel of this movie. I will say the last 15 minutes of the movie doesn't work nearly as well as what had come before, mainly because it came right after the whole, Home Alone scene and the shed scene, and so how do you live up to that, high point of this movie? Because, you kind of get a little downtime. You get to see the family reunite with each other. They take out the goon that was threatening to smash the dad's balls in the Nutcracker, and so there's a nice little fun moments there. But then Santa chases off with the people trying to steal the money, and they all go and they have a final confrontation with John Leguizamo's character. And like I said, that character and his backstory and that confrontation with Santa doesn't feel as warranted as what happened with the goons earlier on in the movie, where they were a little more entertaining to watch, whereas John Leguizamo's character was just kind of fine. He was just kind of there for the rest of this movie. And so when they had their final fights, the choreography and the actual fighting was pretty interesting, but the stakes and the character just wasn't that interesting. But where the movie kind of lost me was when that final goon shows up and shoots Santa. He kills Santa towards the end of this movie, and the whole family gets by his side, and they kind of try to believe in Christmas magic, which has just kind of been a joke throughout the entire movie, where David Harbour doesn't really know how it works. It just magically brings him back to life. And honestly, I feel like it would have worked better if they were still fighting John Leguizamo's character. He's looking like he's going to lose, and then the family sees what's happening, and then they start believing, and that gives him the upper hand to be able to defeat John Leguizamo's character. Maybe that would have been more interesting, just instead of a random goon coming up and shooting him in the back and then him dying and then him coming back to life because magic. It was okay. There wasn't too much entertaining aspects of that, bring him back to life thing. It was just kind of sprinkled in there in the last minute, and I didn't really care too much. Even though I did love David Harbour's portrayal as Santa Claus, I feel like the whole conception of him dying in this movie just didn't have the emotional weight that they wanted it to have. And I was also kind of expecting Mrs. Claus to show up on the sleigh at the end of the movie, and we get some cameo of some main, big actress playing Mrs. Claus. I thought that would have been a little fun joke. But besides that, this movie just was a fun movie. It lived up to its promise at times of being Die Hard with Santa Claus. It didn't have that Hans Gruber thing, but for the most part, this was an enjoyable time at the theater. And this is my type of Christmas movie. If you know me, I don't really love Christmas movies too much. I'll like the big ones like Home Alone and Elf and a couple other ones. Christmas Vacation is also pretty fun, but a lot of years I just don't watch many Christmas movies besides Better Watch Out, which is my favorite Christmas movie of all time, and I think this one also has that fun tone that I like in my Christmas movies. Maybe I'm demented. Maybe this tone just works for me. Like I said, it's not for everybody, but I would recommend this movie to people who like that sort of thing. So thanks everybody for watching this video. Make sure you guys leave a like on the video if you did enjoy, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more reviews just like this one, and make sure to comment down below your thoughts of this movie because I'm very curious to hear all of your thoughts as well. So thanks everybody for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one.